if you have any questions or there is anything you'd like me to clarify, just please, interrupt me at any point. Sorry, I'm just trying to get rid of the...
This on our side.
Yes, on the warning. Okay. I'll try to monitor the chat if people prefer to just write questions or comments in the chat. But if you're comfortable just speaking up, please just unmute yourself or if you're in the room, just speak up and we can pick it from there. Okay. But anyway, I'll try to stop, every few minutes. So just to, have sort of organic ways for people to ask questions. But like I said, any point, please feel free. All right. So I thought I will talk a little bit about, synthetic data, which, can mean many different things. But in particular, we're going to focus on sort of generative models that produce synthetic data. So synthetic data sets that can be used for many different applications. So this is, sort of a relatively hot area with a number of solutions that have been proposed over the past few years. Don't necessarily think about, generative AI like large language models, but, they're actually sort of algorithms that produce sort of simple tabular data or images or, sort of all kinds of data. Okay. The concept of sort of synthetic data has been around for many, many years. So what sort of we focus on now today is really, like I said, synthetic data, so artificially generated data sets that are produced by machine learning models, in particular generative models. Okay, and the reason why synthetic data has been around for a long time is because, as you know, so if you're in a privacy school, as you know, in many different cases, we really struggle with sort of the dichotomy, the conflict between the need to share data and the problem of privacy, right? So you might need to disclose data to, governments or organizations or different companies, different organizations might want to share data with each other. And then, that's maybe very useful, or you may be compelled to do that, right? So overall, the idea is that, okay, how can we try to get the best of both worlds, or like have a good trade-off? Well, we share data, but we don't put in danger the privacy of individuals or organizations whose data we are sharing. So the idea would be to have sort of a magic bullet where, sorry, just let me move something. 1 second. Okay. Right. So the idea would be to have some kind of magic way to have an analyst extract statistical insights from raw data without, endangering the privacy of the individuals, right? So, obviously, if you have access to raw data, then you can violate privacy, and there is a number of issues: confidentiality, data protection, and so on, right? So, like I said, the idea really would be to have a silver bullet that takes this data and creates sort of a sanitized version of the data that preserves the statistical insights, but doesn't put the privacy of people in danger, right? And so this, like I said, it's really a silver bullet that doesn't exist. But in computer science and statistics, people have tried to come as close as possible to this idea, starting even with like anonymization techniques, de-identification techniques, which have really a number of drawbacks. Yeah. So, and this is sort of, like I said, the motivation for a sort of synthetic data, right? So overall, the history is full with incidents from, sort of data releases. So even both simple and complex attempts to de-identify, like I say, anonymize data sets before releasing them have failed spectacularly. So just to cite a few examples, probably one of the most famous ones was AOL, which is, used to be a really important US provider, released search queries that users have done. They tried to sort of anonymize the data set, but that didn't really work. So, I mean, long story short, it turns out that people Google themselves a lot, I mean, among other things. So it was very easy to re-identify who had been doing searches by actually looking at the searches themselves. And just as a simple example, you would search yourself, and that will give you away. Okay, so there were lawsuits following that, but like I said, there is many different examples that I could cite. Also, with respect to very sensitive data like healthcare data. So you probably have heard of the issues with the Netflix contest. So again, Netflix released some anonymized data set containing like ratings of videos, of movies and TV shows. And these were re-identified by using an auxiliary data set, publicly available auxiliary data set from IMDb. Okay. Anyway, so I can go on for hours to talk about that. That's not really, doesn't make a lot of sense. So overall, I think there is now finally a wide consensus in the community that anonymization doesn't really work, or at least doesn't work across the board. So trying to sort of remove identifiers from data is not a strong, solid privacy protection mechanism. Okay, so here comes synthetic data, and there is a lot of efforts both from the research community, like they say academic community, but also from companies. So there is actually a flourishing market that sort of predates these LLM, generative AI boom. Really focused on this particular use case. You need or you want to release or share data sets. So instead of sharing the raw data, you share the synthetic data. There are companies like Mostly AI, Hazy. There is a number, and there is actually a lot of a lot of initiatives also by governments and funding to sort of support this vision. Like the UK government in particular has been investing quite a little money to fund companies and sort of data challenges to actually pilot some studies where government entities like the NHS, which is the National Health Service in the UK, or the Financial Conduct Authority, which is sort of the financial watchdog in the UK, have released synthetic data sets. There was also some US-UK initiatives involving SWIFT, the financial organizations, all aimed at really testing these approaches in the wild. Okay, so like I said, this is happening. There is a market. There are algorithms. There is software. So let's take a little bit of a better look at that from a privacy perspective, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. So just a little bit more in detail what synthetic data does. So what you really do is to learn. What you really want to do is to design an algorithm that is able to learn an approximation of the distribution of the raw data. Okay. And this is fed to a generative model, so that you train a generative model from which you sample and you can create many different versions of a synthetic data set. Okay, of a synthetic data set. So and now you share the synthetic data set, and now you can extract the statistical insights. So once again. The idea is that the statistical insights are close enough when you draw them from the synthetic data set versus the raw data set. Okay, so that's the big idea, right? So I have to make a clarification here. in some cases, like companies sort of release, one synthetic data set or multiple synthetic data set. In some cases, they actually release the trained generative model. So then you sample, you as a customer, let's say, right? You sample the synthetic data set according to however you want, okay? So from a privacy perspective, it's really important that we focus on the way the generative model is trained, not just a particular instance of the particular sample of the synthetic data set. Okay, and I want to actually go through this from the perspective of sort of real life deployment that has been done over the past few years in the context of genomic data. Okay, so this is actually a topic on which I've worked for a few years, more from, let's say, the secure multi-party computation point of view. So how we do, algorithm. I will design algorithms for computational genomic tests in a privacy-preserving way, but that's not what I'm going to talk about today. But the background is kind of similar, right? So there has been, in the past 20 years or so, there's been enormous progress in genome sequencing, where really the idea is that you take you're able to recreate all the DNA letters in a person's genomes. There are like about 3 billion of them. And so you digitize them, and now you can run algorithms. You can run at scale genomic testing, both for research purposes. Let's say you want to discover correlations between predisposition to cancer, or how you react to certain drugs or treatments, and genetic features or genetic mutations, but also for sort of diagnostic testing, like maybe you personalize the way your treatment is done, even diets, or kind of other things, like, so you do tests on yourself. And so it's much easier to sequence your genome once and then really run algorithms, like basically string matching algorithms on your genome to perform testing. Okay, but overall, all these sort of advances have been supported both by really large investments from governments and companies, funding agencies, but also because we've been able to gather, scientists have been able to gather large amounts of genomic data. Okay, and there's been many initiatives to sequence 1 million people in the US. I think they now got to 10 million. Maybe it's the next objective. In the UK, we had something called 100,000 Genome Project. So it's really various initiatives meant to collect as much data as possible, and so that people sort of donate it to science, and so that unlocks sort of research on it. Okay, so there is many different initiatives, and this is something that is very important. It's actually producing a lot of sort of great results. So the fact that now we know a lot more about the genome and sort of its impact on sort of our lifestyles, our health, and diseases, is really being able to save lives. Okay, and in particular with respect to cancer treatment, the fact that we know a lot more about genes and predisposition and response to treatment is really already sort of producing a lot of results. Also helps a lot of people with rare genetic disorders. So this is not a moonshot. Progress in genomes, in genomics, are really important. Okay, but now let's put our privacy hats back and let's think about the possible threats on deriving from exposure, or leakage of genetic data, right? So, and this is happening, of course, whenever you have data, the data is at risk, that can be stolen, can be lost. So data from DNA test services has been leaked. That's actually even maliciously targeted by foreign hackers. And there are really, really important privacy concerns when it comes to genomic data, because actually of the sort of really sort of unique nature of the data, right? So first of all, genomic data is extremely sensitive. It's hard to think about any data that is more sensitive than genomic data. Like if you get access to my genome, you can, or somebody's genome, you can immediately sort of learn about predisposition to diseases. Some may be very sort of sensitive, like I don't know, Alzheimer's, predisposition to Alzheimer's, or some kind of cancer, and it's something that you obviously want to maybe keep private, or in some cases you might fear discrimination. Like in some countries you cannot, or in the past at least, you could not get health insurance if you had pre-existing conditions. You can also learn a lot about ethnic heritage, and so this is, I don't think I have to convince you very hard the privacy of genomic data is very important. It's also like very unique in terms of identification, let's say, properties. Really, the genome by definition is unique. In some cases, if you have an identical twin, maybe you have the exact genome, but just at birth, because that things mutate over time a little bit. So, but overall, there's really like the probability that two people have the same exact genome is very negligible, right? So that also means that any sort of attempts to anonymize or identify genomic data is somewhat moot because it's really unique, right? And I think another important aspect, with especially as I put my sort of applied crypto hat back here, is that you have sensitivity of this data is really perpetual. It's like forever, right? So in cryptography, we are used to think about security of encryption algorithms for like maybe 20 years, 30 years, something like that, right? So that we have standards. There's great work by, like, let's say, NISA and others that provide recommendations on key lengths, and they sort of try to give you an estimate. Okay, you use AES 256 bit keys, and then you're okay for maybe 30 years. Okay, but in 30 years, my genome will still be sensitive, right? It's like it doesn't really, the sensitivity doesn't degrade over time. Unlike, I don't know, financial information or other, even like classified documents in governments, they, after years, they, get declassified, right? And in fact, this sort of sensitivity may even perpetuates over time, over generations, right? Because, let's say in 50 years, maybe I'm not around anymore, but if you get a hold of my genome, basically you're still getting a hold of a lot of information that's also hold for my daughter, for my brother, right? So there is also this sort of keen privacy, as we call them, the fact that leaking one's genome basically means that you're leaking close relatives' genomes as well. Okay, so like I said, it's very hard to anonymize data, and there were like very famous papers that show how anonymization really fails. It's a famous famous paper by Melissa Gimbrek et al. In 2013, so 10 years ago, showing that if you maybe have some side information like surnames of participants, you can actually re-identify a lot of these supposedly anonymous genomes. Aggregation, which is also a technique that we use often to try and boost the privacy of data releases, also doesn't work because of very unique features that genomes have that do not really, for which like signals don't really get hidden from an aggregation algorithm. So if you have statistics from, let's say genomic studies, even these statistics leak information about single participants, even when you aggregate them. And so there is, I think Young and others have talked about attacks like membership inference attacks. So actually the first membership inference attack that I know of was actually proposed not in machine learning, but against genomic data. Okay. So any questions so far?
When you are talking about leaking the genomic information, you mean leaking the gene sequence and also some identifier of the person, or you mean that just?
Yeah, I'm talking about genomic data. Yeah, so leaking maybe some. I mean, not necessarily the entire genome. It can be portions of genomes, or there are, sort of depending on the study that people do. There are specific, they call allele, that people focus on. So even if you leak them and release them without identifiers, they can still be re-identified. So depending on the sort of the kind of auxiliary information that you might have. So maybe that these genomes were collected, in a particular city, or maybe you have like a list of possible participants, like last names or something like that. So some of these studies actually worked because people were uploading some parts of their genomes on other websites, and so there was a sort of like an auxiliary channel, a side channel for the attack. Right. So I think there is a question on the chat, maybe. What is the guarantee that the generative model maintains all the statistical property of the original data set? No, there is no guarantee. And in fact, they don't maintain statistical properties very well. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit more now. Like I said, I'm going to give an example through genomic data, but I will extend the discussion in a bit. Okay. All right. So I don't know why this is not showing, but anyway. So we did like a case studies analysis of a number of generative models that had been used to produce synthetic genomic data. Like I said, if you go back to the beginning of my talk, you can imagine why you may want to build a synthetic genomic data set so that you don't have to disclose real genomes of real people. So if you're interested in just like statistics, then maybe you don't really care to know exactly the characteristics of the genomes or have real genomes. Okay, so there have been a number of initiatives that use recombination models, restricted Boltzmann machines, GANs, and variants of GANs, and we also sort of experimented with combinations of these models. So that's what we call recombination RBM and recombination GAN. So that's kind of new approaches that we tried ourselves. Okay, so what we're going to do is to actually test the utility. So, like, to answer really your question, like, does the synthetic data preserve statistical properties and the privacy of these approaches? Okay, so I think one of my pet peeves when it comes to synthetic data, and it's very important to, I always try to reiterate this point many times and as early as possible, is that when it comes to even like the question on the chat, statistical properties, okay, or utility of the synthetic data, well, it really depends on what you want to do with this data. Okay, so I think there is almost like an impossibility result to be shown that there is no sort of Turing complete approach that allows you to preserve all statistical properties and have exactly everything you want in all possible cases from a statistical data. Like if you had that, I think we can safely say that it will have no privacy, that the synthetic data will be so close to the real data that you could not have any meaningful privacy. Okay, so any attack and privacy, I will talk about it later. We kind of define it as what is the advantage in a cryptographic way, even like what is the advantage that an adversary has if it has access to the real data compared to the synthetic data, right? So that's a sort of a baseline, real data, synthetic data. Okay, so it's important that we talk about specific tasks, And I think this is something that I'll come back to. And so that's what we do. Actually, we take real data sets that are commonly used in research, genomic research, and we create synthetic data sets, and we run tasks that are very commonly used in like I said, genomic research and things like that. Okay, so the first thing that we try is a very simple one, which is allele statistics. So this is what is an allele. Essentially, an allele is one of two forms, or 2+ forms that a gene can take, arising from a mutation found at some place. So it's basically one of the two forms. Like typically, you have a mutation or not. Okay, that's an allele. And so in many cases, you want to count like the frequency at which the most common alleles, that's what we call major allele frequency, occurs within a population. Okay, and this is typically a simple statistical test that is used to differentiate between common and rare variants. Okay, so when you do studies, you recruit participants, you sequence the genome testing, and first thing you do is try to identify whether within that population of participants you have common or rare variants. Okay, and so these plots are going to be very hard to read, so I'll just show them, but I'm just going to tell you what they say. Okay, so here we plot these frequencies as run on different data sets. Okay, the blue line is the real data set, and the other colors are the data sets, the synthetic data sets created by the different algorithms like ReComb, RBM, GAN, and so on. Okay, so overall, anything that comes from GAN really sucks. There is really the statistical properties are not preserved at all. The other ones, they're sort of okay. Okay. So then the next thing we do is look at population statistics. So really the percentage of calls, so the percentage of things happening within a population. And so we look at different genomes, and so like real genomic data sets, again, run it on different data sets as different outputs of the algorithms. And so you can see, again, the blue line is the real one, and you can see just ReComb is sorry, okay, I'm just going to skip the details. So ReComb combined with RBM, they're kind of okay. They sort of preserve the statistics. The other ones actually create new variants, and that's kind of bad. It sort of invalidates the research that you might want to do. There's other examples. I'm gonna go a little bit faster here, but so we look at linkages equilibrium, which is again a very common metric used in genomics, and kind of tries to quantify the non-random allele associations at 2 or more positions in the genome. And we have sort of it's a value between 0 and 1. So again, we do it on it's used a lot to optimize different things. Here RBM is kind of okay. Other generative models fail to preserve the linkages equilibrium. Okay. And in the paper, this was presented at NDSS last year or 2 years ago. Sorry, we have a lot more experience. But now let's go to privacy, right? So we kind of saw that utility. Well, do these models preserve utility? It depends. Some models are okay on some tasks. Some are not. Some are like sort of not really great on any of the tasks that we experimented with. But what about privacy? Can we now sort of abstract away from the task and look at actually the amount of information that is sort of leaked while you disclose synthetic data set versus disclosing the real data set? And for this, we actually use a framework, which is kind of like a state-of-the-art. It was published at Usenix last year by one of my students, and Carmela Troncoso at EPFL and one of her students, that really tries to look at what can the adversary do if they have access to a trained generative, so if they have access to the synthetic data set versus the raw data set. Okay, so like I said at the beginning, I think it would be great to have an adversary that works on access to the generative model rather than a synthetic data set, and this is sort of work in progress. Okay, but let's start with the simplest thing. So the adversary gets access to the synthetic data set. What do they learn compared to what they will learn from the raw data set? So do they really learn nothing, or do they learn almost the same as having access to the raw data set, or somewhere in between? Okay, so they proposed a framework that quantifies privacy using essentially the success of a membership inference attack. Okay, so is that safe to assume that membership inference was already covered in the school?
Yes, it was.
Okay, great. So I can sort of go fast here and show more or less how things work. Basically, you have a sample that has a specific record and a sample that does not have that record, and you try to differentiate between whether or not the sample has the data, right? So kind of like in a crypto sense. Okay, and so this is the output of the classifier. The membership inference attack classifier is used to quantify privacy. Okay, and more specifically, the privacy metric is called a privacy gain, which tells you how much more privacy we have compared to by giving access to the adversary to only the synthetic data set versus giving him access to the real data set. Okay, and so this metric is somewhere between 0 and 0.5, and 0.5 is the least that the least that you can do, because it's a random guess, right? So that's why the metric is not between 0 and 1. And so we run experiments where we run this membership inference attack. So this is an empirical measurement of privacy. Okay, for models that are trained in a differentially private way, then which unfortunately in the genomic setting, none of them had any noise. They were not using differential privacy. For that, you could use an analytical bound given by the epsilon value, but because these models were not trained with differential privacy, these are models actually used, in genomics. Because there's no differential privacy, then we have to do it empirically. Okay, and I think another interesting open problem is, in this setting, is to see how close sort of empirical evaluation of privacy from membership inference or other attacks how close they are to analytical bounds given by differential privacy when differential privacy is used. Okay, but in case you're looking for problems to work on, I think that's an important one. It's an interesting one. There's been some attempts, but there's still a lot of work to be done. All right, so they actually use two different attacks, not just membership inference, but also attribute inference. I'm going to sort of skip it for the interest of time. And again, these plots are a bit hard to read, but here you can see the privacy gain, like I said, on the y-axis, which is between 0 and 0.5, given by different. So on the x-axis, you can see the different algorithms, generative models, RECOM, RBM, WGAN, and so on, and for different classifiers. Okay, so here the classifier is the attack classifiers. So it's the classifier that tries to infer membership. Okay, so you can see different points, because you have, different data points are vulnerable in different ways to membership influence attacks, if there are outliers or not, right? But overall, you can see that the privacy gain is sort of like all over the place, right? You can see some, it's really sort of stationary around, like on Recom, stationary around 2.5. For others, you have really sort of some that have zero privacy gain at all, some that have a lot of privacy gain, like 0.5. So it really, really depends. But overall, Recom seems to work, so it seems to kind of give us the best trade-off in that it has the, I'm getting confused now. So Recom gives us the lowest privacy gain, although it has the kind of best utility. So what you really want is trying to find some kind of good trade-off between utility and privacy, which we don't seem really to obtain. So we have some models that are kind of okay with respect to utility on the tasks that we experimented with, but then they give us low privacy gain. So the fact that you give access to the adversary, you give the synthetic data set versus a real data set, doesn't change much with respect to the adversary. Okay. Any questions? No? Okay. So in the paper, we also presented a new membership influence attack that has what we call something with partial information. So here we give attacker access to only a fraction of SNVs. These are single nucleotide variants, okay, from the target sequence, and they're chosen at random. So we can see that actually the attacker can perform really well. TLDR, the attacker can perform still well even without having access to sort of all the sample. Okay, so we readjust the definition of the privacy gain, and we run a number of experiments, and we see that even if when the attacker has just 5% target access to target information, it has pretty good results. Okay, so that gives us maybe a better way to explain how the attacker would work in the real world. Okay, right. Okay, let me skip this. So overall, the takeaways that we got from these sort of case studies on genomic data is that high quality synthetic data, in particular in genomics, as we show, on the one hand, they need to accurately capture the relations between data points. But when you do that, then you also enable attackers to infer sensitive information about the training data that was used to generate the synthetic data. So there is a big conflict, right? And there are certain sort of attributes that really matter. So even like, for instance, the size of the training data set matters a lot. So if you have small data sets, you're more vulnerable to privacy attacks. Again, maybe not very surprising. But overall, there is no one method that outperforms the others for all metrics and all data sets. And like I said, it's very important to understand that you need to keep the task in mind. Okay, so in particular, I think the easiest way to explain it, sometimes when I talk to non-technical people, is that if your task is, let's say, do some outlier detection, anomaly detection, right? So you have some data set, let's say, on mobility patterns, for instance. That's a use case that came up when I was trying to do some work in collaboration with an organization here in London. So if you have mobility patterns of people that you actually did think about transport companies like the London subway system, the tube, they actually have data, very high quality data of how people travel through London, right? They see where you enter the subway, where you exit. So they know, for instance, how many people are in a station, at a station at any given time, and so on. They can see how things respond, how things react to closures of lines, delays, strikes, events, concerts, and so on. So there's very, very, very powerful, very useful information, which would be great to release or sell, right? But obviously you can't do that for privacy and confidentiality reason. So they wanted to see, if you can generate synthetic data sets of this transportation data and run analytics on it. So again, it really matters what you're going to do with it. If you want to do anomaly detection, so let's say detection that some users act really in a strange way, in an anomalous way, then you have really no hope of having privacy and utility at the same time, right? Because if you want to have privacy, then you have to sort of hide that outlier, right? You have to hide that anomaly. Otherwise, that would be easy to spot, right? That would be easy to leak. So, I mean, that seems obvious, but not, let me tell you, not really obvious to a lot of people outside our community. Okay. So, any questions here? This is a good time to take a break, maybe. Is there anything on the chat?
There's one question, but I think it's an old one.
Oh, sorry, I don't see the chat. Okay. How do I see the chat? Sorry, I haven't.
Well, I'll check the chat, but I think it's the old question.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a question from Martin Venesh that was asked some time ago.
Okay. Any questions from the audience?
Any questions? Yes, there's a question.
Okay.
Maybe we can use the mic.
I'll wait for the mic. Thanks. I was just wondering about the incentive of why even generate synthetic human genomic data when you can use data from, for example, domestic animals to test many things.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on things. Like, I think if you want to, for instance, test.
They're not going to be that much different than structure and statistics, yeah? Because to be honest, we are not that much different from a pig or a rat.
I'm sorry, say again?
So we are not that much different from a pig or a rat, yes? So the basic statistics will be very, very
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm not an expert in genomics at all, so I don't know. I mean, I know that there are many initiatives where people, where researchers get humans data. So I would guess there is a reason why they do that, but I'm not really an expert.
I think it's not really a question for a computer scientist doing.
Yeah.
We went under the assumption that people need this.
All right.
Any more questions? Any more questions? Okay, then I think we can.
Okay. Right. So I already sort of mentioned this to some extent. Right. So really, the way you release data, you provide access to data in a way that you can reason in a solid way about privacy is actually using the differential privacy framework, right? And there are actually attempts, and I'm going to cover some examples to train generative models in a differentially private way. Okay, so let me just skip this for the interest of time. Okay, so the idea is really, I mean, I don't know if that was covered already, but I'll just give you a very quick definition of differential privacy. We say that an algorithm M is epsilon delta differentially private if for any pairs of neighboring data sets D prime, and for all outputs of the algorithm, the probability that you can distinguish between the algorithm being run on D versus D prime is bounded by a small constant epsilon. Okay, what does neighboring data sets mean? Means data sets are identical except for one record. Okay, so basically, let's say in the context of synthetic data, right? You can have two different synthetic data that are, they were generated by a generative model, and in one case the generative model was trained using my data, and in another case was not. In the other case was not. It was trained not with my data. So exactly the same data, except one time with my data, with my record, one time without my record. Okay. And so if you can distinguish between these two things, right, it means that you have no privacy, right? So this is not a binary definition, is bounded by a probability, like I said, epsilon, which quantifies really the information leakage. So this is a sort of a weaker notion of differential privacy because it has the delta parameter as well, which allows for a small probability of failure, and small really is meant to be asymptotically small. Okay, so this is what is used a little bit more often, at least in this context, and the framework that we use. So it has this delta parameter. Okay, so there actually differential privacy is used more and more often. It was actually used in the U.S. census. Companies, I mean, I'm sure it was talked about in the context of learning. So companies like Google or Apple use it in production, and it's actually obtained by adding noise, basically. Okay, in a sound intelligent way. Okay, and it's the framework of differential privacy also has some interesting properties that are useful for machine learning. One is the post-processing theorem that tells us if an algorithm is epsilon differentially private and f is a function, then if you run the function on the output of the differentially private algorithm, the output of the function is still differentially private. You can compose algorithms. So if you have k algorithms that are epsilon private, then an algorithm that composes them is k times epsilon private. So again, this is a bound. So the higher the epsilon value, the lower the privacy, right? So here you have k times larger value, so less privacy, but it's very easy for theorem for proofs to use this composition theorem. It's very, very useful. And also you have modularity that's used a lot. So you can design algorithms, and when you use subroutines, you can keep track of the privacy budget in an easy way. Okay, so a few years ago, and then I'll just give you some basic example of how you can train generative models in a differentially private way, with sort of the drawbacks of it. Is what we did, like I said, a few years ago. We had a paper at ICDM that uses sort of the idea of splitting data into clusters so that the sensitivity of the data within that cluster is lower, and we can add less noise, and we have better utility, and then use the composition theorem and the modularity to combine the different clusters together and have a synthetic data. Okay, so this means that first we have to cluster, and we have to do it in a privacy-preserving way, so in a differentially private way. So this is a new algorithm that we designed called private kernel k-means, and then we train generative models on each cluster separately. Okay, so we experimented with restricted Boltzmann machines and other generative models. And then we combine the output together, and that's our synthetic data set. Okay, let me just skip this for a second. The way you actually run the generative model in a differentially private way basically boils down to running the stochastic gradient descent, which is the algorithm used by most sort of deep learning algorithms these days. In a differentially private way. So adding clipping gradients and adding noise and keeping track of the budget using the so-called moments accounted mechanism. Okay, so this is sort of standard way of doing it. So our kind of contribution was really the idea of clustering and actually performing the clustering in a differentially private way. Okay, but what I really wanted to talk about, I wanted to show is what are the results of of this approach. Okay, so we can compute privacy using the privacy budget. So we don't do an empirical evaluation here. We use the upper bound provided by the differential privacy framework, and we test on for utility. Then we do it empirically. So we run both resistive Boltzmann machines and variational autoencoders, and we have experiments on images, and for which the utility is really given to you by the sort of visual quality of the generated samples, and then we do it also on tabular data. Okay, so counting queries. Okay, so privacy guarantees. Okay, like I said, we use the analytical approach, differential privacy. This is nothing surprising given by our proofs and by our plots. More noise, more privacy. Okay, this is not surprising. We also look at the way that the privacy depends on the batch size and the size of the data set. We look at how accurately we can cluster, and we show that our algorithm, a new algorithm, private kernel k-means, performs better than sort of a off-the-shelf adding noise, doing differential privacy on k-means. We also discovered that shorter RFF features provide better accuracy, especially for small epsilon values, which are means higher privacy. But here is the discussion that I wanted to take with respect to utility. Okay, so this is a very, very simple data set called MNIST. It has handwritten digits. So there's 10 classes, one per digit, right? 0 to 9. And you can see different ways that people write digits. Okay, so now assume that you use this data set to train a generative model and have synthetic, artificially generated handwritten digits. So the first thing to show is that, like, the difference between clustering, like the impact of clustering. So for the same privacy budget, you can see variational encoder, the third plot, versus without clustering versus with clustering. You can see how much better the handwritten digits are when you use the clustering. So this intuition of clustering data set into smaller data sets that are more similar to each other means that we can add less noise for the same amount of privacy, resulting in better utility. But, and this is very important, I think, you can see that the digits all kind of look alike, right? So you're kind of losing the variety, let's say, of handwritten digits, of how people write digits, right? So when you create these artificial samples, okay? And that's, again, goes back to this sort of conflict, okay? If you want to preserve a lot of variety, a lot of outliers and things like that, then you will lose in terms of privacy. Okay, so that really depends. So it really depends what kind of task you want to run. So if you actually need many different kinds of images, then this approach is not good for you because you will lose the variety. If you're just interested at sort of producing some samples, then maybe it's okay. Okay, but this, I think, visually this explains a lot what I was discussing earlier. Okay, we also do it for and sort of tabular data. So the task that we run is a counting query, and so the idea is that you have telcos, and so network providers that have these cold data record data sets. These are this data set contains data about who called who from where at what time, okay? Or like who connected to which tower cell to, I don't know, browse the internet or send SMS or something at a given time, Okay, and so these are very, very useful data sets in many different kind of applications. They're used in, like, even for instance, to, let's say you want to open a new McDonald's in Warsaw and you want to know where you should put it. You can sort of ask telcos to tell you statistic about footfall. So to understand, for example, on this street, lunchtime, there's a lot of people walking by. So this is a good place for a new McDonald's, for instance. Okay? But obviously this data is very privacy sensitive, and telcos are not allowed to share the data. So they, maybe provide some services, but they cannot share or sell the data as is. So again, one application would be to generate synthetic data sets from it, and then run this quantum query. So how many people are connected to this tower cell? So how many people are roughly in this location, at lunchtime? Okay. So actually, this is a real data set that we got from a telco in a collaboration that some of my co-authors at INRIA had, and we can actually see that the error on our algorithm compared to state of the art is very, very low. So in this setting, actually, things work quite well. This is run on variational autoencoder with a reasonable privacy budget, epsilon equals 1, and so we actually get good utility, good results in the response of the query. Okay. So, any questions about this? How much time do I have? About half an hour? Okay.
Around half an hour.
So Emiliano, this is Peter. I wanted to ask you a question. Do you happen to know why in this application DP was easy to apply? What's the intuition? Like, in general, it's actually difficult to apply. Is there a lot of structure in it? That was one. The other one, this is tabular data, right? So you said you're using variational autoencoders. Did you do anything specific to handle the categorical nature, the discrete nature of the data?
Yeah, so with respect to the first question, I think the idea is that because the task is very simple, like the counting query. So I don't think it necessarily will work very well on if you do other kind of tasks. But for this particular data where you have, like I said, you really want to know how many people are in a location at the specific point of time in a crowded city. I mean, obviously there are some already the telco removes like there is a minimum amount. So if like it's a station doesn't have at least 100 users connect to it, it just goes to 0. That data is removed, okay, suppressed. But anyway, so that's there's very you're really capturing very high level statistics that don't have a lot of sort of information about single users. That's why it works well. But the second you try to run other tasks like anomaly, actually we have another paper where we try to do that with anomaly detection. It doesn't work very well at all. So like you want to see, like let's say you have a pattern for some stations, what is like the seasonal pattern for some tube station, and then you want to detect that things are different. Then it starts to get into trouble. You start to get into trouble. So with respect to the second question, variational autoencoder, and I mean that we just use state of the art. I didn't really. I mean, I'm not really an expert on these things, and I think neither were my co-authors. So we just use state of the art variational autoencoder. I think what we really do is just apply moments accountant to do DP SGD. Nothing else. So maybe there's ways to do things better, or maybe we're missing something, but I don't really know.
And is this data set open to public, or it was just
unfortunately not
to you? Okay.
Unfortunately not. But there are other data sets that are somewhat similar that you can get. Like I think the closest one is the New York taxi data set. Then there are other data sets that you can like ask, and they may give it to you. Like Orange had some data sets again for cold data records that you could like form a part, like you can sign some documents that would share to you. Lausanne, the EPFL guys, I think they also had collected some data set through Nokia. They had like a few years ago. Also, you could request. But with respect to like completely publicly available data, I think the New York taxi data set is the sort of best and what people use with respect to mobility. So you just manually have to like maybe divide the New York. I think it's Manhattan and Brooklyn. You divide the city into grids, and then you aggregate on that grid within a specific period of time, and that it's like close enough to this.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Emiliano.
Sure. Any other question? Okay, if not, let's see if I can cover one last sort of result and one last aspect of privacy preserving synthetic data, which I artificially, which I mistakenly call fairness. It's not really fairness. I mean, I think, really fairness means something else, but I will explain to you what I really mean in a second, okay? So again, the idea is to look at how synthetic data generated by differentially private generative models work, and in particular, we want to look at the disparate effect that differential privacy can have on different members of the population. And this was motivated by previous work that had been done in the context of statistics and deep learning classifiers, so not generative models, let's say discriminative models that show that when you train models in a differentially private way, the loss in accuracy, for instance, on the classification task, is different across different subgroups. And one potential issue is that when these groups are related to maybe racial attributes, or maybe you have issues with minorities, right? So underrepresented classes, right? And so this may be potentially an issue that, maybe it's just an artifact of the fact that, you have smaller subgroups, or you have minorities, so you may need to add more noise, and you might hurt the accuracy for those subgroups more. Okay, so there's been a number of work here. In the slide, I cite some of them, but to the best of our knowledge, nothing had been done in the context of generative models. And in particular, we want to look at the disparate effects that DP has on class and subgroup size and class and subgroup accuracy. Okay, so we experiment with three, and this was an ICML paper last year. Sorry, I didn't put references on my slide, but I'm happy to send links to anybody who's interested, or you can probably find it via a simple Google search. Anyway, so we experiment with three differentially private generative models: PRIV-Bayes, which uses Laplace, DP-W-GAN, which uses sort of a standard DP-SGD, and PATE-GAN, which uses PATE as a sort of underlying algorithm, underlying differentially private algorithm. We also work with 4 different data settings, so a binary class, multi-class, single attribute, and multi-attribute, and we look at size and accuracy, or size, precision, and recall, depending on the setting, which one makes more sense. Okay. We also vary privacy budget and imbalance levels of the subgroups, and we kind of try to understand what's going on. Okay. Again, so these plots are going to be a little bit hard to read, but I'm going to give you the what they actually mean. Okay. So here in the first setting, we have a binary class size, and we measure so we have a binary class. We measure the class size, precision, and recall. In the second setting, we have a multi-class, and we measure size, precision, and recall. And sorry, let me just skip. Okay, these plots are very hard to read. Okay, so overall, we show through these various experiments that differentially private generating models do not really generate data in similar classes and subgroup proportions to the real data. Okay, so the differential privacy distorts the proportion, sort of yielding a Robin Hood or Matthew effect. So Robin Hood, like, you know, the rich gets poorer, Matthew, everybody gets poorer effect. I think what is actually the most interesting result for me is that training a classifier. So if you use the synthetic data and you use it to train, a classifier, actually have this sort of similar, this disparate impact on accuracy as training a differential privacy classifier on the real data. Okay, so this means that really this is an artifact of the noise itself, right? So we do see that smaller classes, subgroups suffer more, and this is similar to what happens, like say, in previous work on differential and on classifiers. But we don't see like something like, okay, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, but we actually see that everybody gets poorer, like everybody gets worse accuracy. Okay, again, pointing to the fact that synthetic data, you know, it's very, very hard. I don't want to say impossible, but I am very skeptical. Overall, I'm very negative that with, you know, synthetic data, you can have high accuracy and reasonable privacy across the board. Okay, and we also see very different behaviors from different models. Also across different privacy and data imbalance levels. So overall, we observe that sort of a similar effect that also in generative models trained with differential privacy, you may create issues for subgroups or specifically, in particular, when they're smaller, which in the real world may relate to you know, minorities or underrepresented classes, right? So this is very something to keep into account. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop here so that we have some time for questions and for break. So please, if you have any other questions, very happy to answer them.
Any questions? Yeah. Maybe in chat.
I might have a very general question.
Make my microphone.
Hi, so I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
So I have kind of, okay, so correct me if I'm wrong. You started the presentation by mentioning that anonymizing data has many problems. It's not like solid security. Then maybe we should use synthetic data and make use of all those DP tools. But then kind of you mentioned through your presentation that those tools still don't work unless it's a specific scenario. Should we be positive towards this synthetic data concept, or will it be kind of overtaken by another idea that is better? What's your intuition?
Right. So yeah, I mean, to clarify, I started my talk saying that, you know, there is a lot of effort and a lot of initiatives and companies that believe that that's the way to go. But I think not just our work, a lot of work shows the limitation of it. So I don't have a sort of a binary answer. I know people that say, okay, synthetic data is always an awful idea. You should never use it. I'm not quite extreme, but I am quite negative to answer your question. So there's very, very like fundamental challenges besides, the fact that, there is a lot of hype and there is a lot of people promising that synthetic data is like a magic bullet that will solve everything and will work sort of independent of the task. But there is some fundamental thing, because in many cases, you train a model without really knowing what the model is supposed to do, like what kind of tasks are they going to be run on. So, and when you do, in the settings where you do, I think there are like ways to do things without actually generating synthetic data. So you can, use sort of standard differential privacy. So the advantage of sort of synthetic data versus, sort of the traditional framework of differential privacy is that you train a model once and you release the model, or you release the synthetic data, and, people can do whatever they want with it, right? Whereas in the sort of differential privacy setting, you have, maybe you issue query and, you don't have a sort of unlimited number of queries, right? So that's, one of the sort of maybe limitations of differential privacy. But like I said, if you know what you've been using, what you'll be using it for, then what is the point of having, what is the advantage of saying, okay, I train a model once and then I release it, you know what I mean? So there is some fundamental issue, like some fundamental conflict, I think, between having this sort of flexibility of doing whatever you want and having high utility on a number of tasks and reasonably strong privacy. So there may be some really specific corner cases where maybe, yes, that's the way to go, but they're very, very specific. So it's not really a general purpose sort of approach, in my opinion.